right? So like you have $1 million in your 401k. I try not to talk about the assets and I try and start to talk about the income.
To meet that 30, 40-year target for retirement, however long that you're projecting.
If they're overloaded on risk, especially at the beginning of their retirement. And I think it goes twofold. Not only could that maybe curb the amount that they could use as income, but then emotionally, that's really hard to come back from.
Welcome to Retirement Done Right with your hosts, David Rath and Pat Kalish, where we talk about retirement, social security, taxes, estate planning, wealth planning, and more. Now, onto the show.
On today's episode, we are going to be dissecting a quote that was given to me while I was waiting online to get an autograph from the captain of the USA hockey team from 1980, the Miracle on Ice, Mike Eruzione. But before we do that, just want to welcome Pat onto the show here. Pat, let's get going. And I want to set the backdrop for what we're talking about today. I was in line in Lake Placid to meet Mike Eruzione from the hockey team from 1980. And while I was in line, there was a gentleman behind me who coincidentally had actually attended that game when he was 15 years old. And we got to talking, and he mentioned that he had retired 3 years ago. And I asked him how things were going, and his quote really stuck out to me. And he said, "The first year was terrifying, worrying about running out of money and what I was going to be doing with my life, but I've settled in nicely, year 3. So let's unpack that. And first of all, does that surprise you?
Me? Not at all. Not at all. And I mean, I build so many income-based retirement plans. And you know what's funny is when I build the plans and people are ready, right? Or they feel like they're ready and we're starting to build the plans. There's a lot of excitement in the room. It's like, hey, we're finally doing this. We feel like this is going to be a great transition into retirement. We have enough money. We're not worried about it. And then we might have the second meeting or the third meeting, call it 6 months to a year after. And there's many people that I found struggle with that first year of retirement. I think it's like a loss of identity. And then the conversation turns from the financial planning, investment, income strategy to more so like, how are you dealing with this emotionally? Do you have to go back to work because that's a big part of your routine? Or can we kind of ride this through and see if, you might be able to get out onto the other side and just change mentally to really make this a great experience? So I'm not surprised one bit.
And I heard it said somewhere, I can't remember where, but when somebody retires, they're losing two things, their income and their identity. And I think that fear, those fears are all wrapped up into the quote that this gentleman gave me. What was surprising for me, and I shared this with you offline, is that he was in the industry. He was a trader for the bond desk for a very, very large RIA like we are. And so he understands money, he understands financial planning. And even with all of that, and I'm sure he probably had some member of the team run projections for him and do all the things that we do for our clients. But despite that, he was still, quote unquote, terrified in that first year.
Yeah. And I mean, that point, so many people that we work with could have retired 5, 10 years ago. Right? Like they're okay. They have the financial assets to do it. And we can kind of paint the picture on how we're going to make this work from a financial standpoint. But it's really, I think, the emotional shift that a lot of people don't prepare for. And like if you're working with a good advisor, you've already prepared for this in advance. It's that emotional shift of losing that structure and, within your day to day and really losing maybe a part of yourself because you've given so much of yourself up to the work that you do, which I think is sometimes the most challenging aspect of this. So I'm not even surprised that somebody within our industry struggled. David, I think personally, I've got a long ways to go, but I'm a planner at heart. I think I'm going to struggle, definitely, because you guys are a big part of my life.
I heard a great analogy that imagine you lived in the desert and you had been hoarding water for the last 40 years, right? You've just been making deposits into this reservoir of water.
Yeah. Oh, I like this. Yeah.
And then day one of that shift, Now you have to start drinking that water, right? And
Yeah.
watering your crops or whatever you're doing with it. So there's this idea of scarcity
Hmm.
in the amount of money that you've accumulated for retirement, and worrying that that is now going to evaporate, to use a water analogy here. That's
Yeah.
a scary proposition for people. So let's unpack that first fear, and that is the fear of running out of money. And so I think there's different elements of this for people, because you have your nest egg, right? And you are looking at that balance and it's fluctuating up and down with whatever the market is doing. But there's also the idea of that steady paycheck that people
Mhm.
have been used to their whole life, and shifting from n- paycheck every day or every 2 weeks for the last 40 years to now no consistent paycheck. That's a scary proposition for people, even just the schematics of it and the
Yeah.
operational things behind the scene.
Yeah. There's a lot of planning. I think what you brought up, right, is that when you're working towards retirement, it's all about deposits. And then you hit retirement and it's all about withdrawals. I mean, mentally, that's a really hard shift. And for many people that are really prepared for retirement, they've been diligent savers, right? And that was a big part of what they've done. And a big part of, their biweekly pay went to save for this long-term goal. I think the first thing that I always try and do after we have the discussion that they're ready to make this transition is to try and really build a very thoughtful plan in terms of how that income is going to be received. And what I try and do, David, is I try and take the conversation away from assets. Right. So, like, you have $1 million in your 401k. I try not to talk about the assets and I try and start to talk about the income, because I think retirees can more so resonate with income over assets, right? And really, a big part of the planning is how are all of your income sources going to interact, right? And for many retirees, there's multiple different sources. It's Social Security, maybe there's pension income that they have, and then how do you basically take this nest egg of assets and create a livable income stream that is going to be able to supplement your overall expenses? And I like to do some thoughtful planning in that mindset, not just for the fact of, hey, we want to make sure that they don't outlive their money and that we're doing things in an efficient way. But I think the more thoughtful that my plans are, the more confidence that people have. And saying, like, I am okay. Like, I can take this amount from my portfolio, consider it income to cover my living expenses, and I'm not going to outlive my money. So that's where I think the plan really comes into play, is more so providing people with the confidence of knowing that I can do this, and I'm okay kind of, taking income from my portfolio.
I'm going to key in on that one word there. That's confidence, and
Yeah.
giving people the confidence to be able to spend and enjoy themselves in those, especially in those first few years of
Yep.
retirement.
Oh my gosh.
Those are the golden years. Those are the go-go years, as sometimes people refer to it in our industry. That's when you should be enjoying yourself. You just had this major life milestone. You should
Mhm.
not be living it in fear. And so, one of the things that we can do for somebody is to structure that paycheck,
Yep.
where instead of receiving a paycheck from your job, you're now receiving a paycheck from Continuum. And we handle all of the nitty gritty behind the scenes to make sure that that hits your bank account on a monthly basis. We're doing the analysis about tax impact, and we're running projections, and we're making sure that that money that you've accumulated will last you, depending on whatever circumstances are out there, and that you're also not skipping a beat. You're still seeing that deposit in your bank account. And I think that that gives people the confidence to go out and enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
There is a piece of our software, the retirement planning software that we use, where it shows the variable versus the fixed sources of income in the future, right? Where
Hmm.
your fixed sources are going to be social securities or
Yeah.
pensions, or if you're planning on annuitizing something. And changing that math for people can really help them have that confidence to say, these are my fixed expenses. Everything else on top, that's set up for long-term growth. And you feel a lot more comfortable about the market and what that does moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's the difference, right, between like need and want. Like, well, first we know what we need, and typically most retirees do, right? They've ran a budget and they're like, this is exactly what I need to kind of make ends meet. That could be housing expenses, tax costs, things along that sort. And then we talk about the want, right? It's like if we can cover the need and say we can even cover the need from those fixed expenses, Social Security, pensions, right? Then we can really build in the want. And I think that helps people kind of think through having enough to be able to not just live, but to enjoy kind of retirement. And I'll say this too, I'm not going to dive into the logistics because there's a lot that goes into running an income plan, a well thought through tax efficient income plan. But I was working with my parents, and good example is my dad. My dad was a nurse anesthetist, and they were diligent savers. He could have actually retired pre-COVID. COVID hit, and he's like, "No, Pat, I have to do this. Like, this is why I signed up for nurse anesthesia." So I give him a lot of respect for that. But he retired right after COVID, and he really had a hard time with that transition. I think the best thing that we did here at Continuum is to set up that paycheck, explain how it worked, because my dad likes to know how things work behind the scenes, but then set up a monthly distribution or a monthly deposit into his checking account. That really helped them and him and my mom just have the confidence of knowing that this month that this money is coming in consistently. So now you can go out and live and plan around that. And I actually gave him a little bit more than what he even thought. And guess what? He's spending it. I'm happy for him. But I think that's sometimes the approach that you have to take as an advisor to say, like, you are very comfortable, like you can do this. So we need to set up a really methodical way to help you spend more money, essentially.
And there is a balance between having everything fixed and converting all of your savings to this fixed source of income, because then the hidden danger is going to be inflation. And
Yep.
no matter how much we tell people not to, they're still going to be checking their portfolio balances probably more frequently than they should.
Mm-hmm.
And so controlling for some of the volatility that's present in the market, that's what we do on our end from an investment management standpoint, and making sure that people are comfortable that that growth rate that we built into that retirement projection, we're still looking to target that, and we're still on track. Because as we talked about in a recent webinar, one of the biggest risks for retirees is that sequence of return risk. And you have, let's call it $1 million. It's an easy round number. And then a bear market hits, and you're watching your portfolio value decline by 10, 20, 30%, 40%, whatever it is. That is not a great scenario for you if you are actively taking withdrawals. But you need to have some level of risk in your investments in order to meet that 30, 40-year target for retirement, however long that you're projecting. So it is a balance to strike. You can't just say, all right, I'm done. I'm withdrawing everything, putting it all into an annuity, annuitizing. I have this flat source of income. You could do that, but now you're going to be beholden to whatever inflation is in the future.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And I think that's where we work so closely together, because I do a lot of like the longer term, kind of forecasts on the overall plan. Does this income stream work to make sure they don't outlive their money? Well, a lot of times, like my assumptions baked under the plan are not even prior market returns, which were ripping, so to speak, right? Like they're more moderate type long-term returns that we can expect from a portfolio. And then I think your approach, right, is, hey, we need to continue to grow these assets, but not at any cost. And we need to be very mindful of the downside that can happen to kind of smooth out the ride. And I think that's so critically important for retirees, because they could get hurt if they're overloaded on risk, especially at the beginning of their retirement. And I think it goes twofold. Not only could that maybe curb the amount that they could use as income, but then emotionally, that's really hard to come back from, right? Like if you retire and the market sells off 30% and your own portfolio does, I don't know if you're going to be able to retire emotionally to then have the confidence, even when the market comes back, to be able to spend from that portfolio. And David, like I review a lot of, statements for people interested in working with us, and the market has been really kind to us the past couple of years. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people are overloaded on risk and thinking about retirement. So we need to have the conversation because I think it's such a critical aspect of making sure that this income stream is going to last for the long term and like smooth out the emotional ride throughout, your distribution phase.
It's really easy to be a buy and hold investor with most of your money in
Yeah.
stocks when the stock market's going up. During a bull market, every time the market declines, it comes right back. There's no prolonged bear market. But as we know, history does not show that to be the case. There are periods of time where the market goes up. Those are called secular bull markets. There's periods of time where you go through rolling bear markets where things are flat for a decade plus. And I actually showed that graphic in our webinar about lost decades from 2000 to 2011. The S&P 500 total return was 0% for over a decade. That is a long, long time to be hoping that your money's going to grow. And if you don't have a plan for dealing with that sort of volatility in your investments, you are going to now be stressed. It adds to the anxiety that you have during retirement because it's not like stock markets were flat 0% over those 11 years. You had multiple 40 and 50% declines in the S&P 500 over that period of time. So you're mentally stressed and the math starts to not make sense anymore.
Yep.
Because now you are actively withdrawing from that portfolio and you're probably going to make a poor decision from an emotional standpoint when that pain becomes too much and you just say, sell, get out. I don't care about my future projections. I just want to be in cash. I know cash, it's safe.
Yeah. And I say this too about like risk tolerance. That plays a big role when we're building plans here because some of our most conservative investors are young investors and some of our more aggressive investors are older, right? But it does depend upon the emotion. And I think for us, it's like we need to consistently have those conversations and just show the impact to those decisions while still, growing these portfolios, but not at any cost and always having a focus in on the downside. Because I know, David, you bring this up a lot and I love the way you put it. We look at ourselves as more of like risk managers, especially for retirees, because we need to try and continue to keep that consistent income stream. And we don't want a poor market to throw off the income to allow you to enjoy your retirement.
Yeah. Second part of that quote from before is what am I going to do with my life? And I found it interesting when you were talking about your father.
Mm-hmm.
He was a nurse anesthetist. That's
Yep.
how you labeled him, right? He was a nurse anesthetist. When I talk about my father, he's also retired. He was a banker. That was their job and that was their identity. And it is hard to go from 35, 40 years, whatever it is, of labeling yourself based on your occupation to now, what do you call yourself, right? When somebody says, what are you? What do you do?
Yep.
Once you're retired, that identity is now gone. And sure, you're a father, you're a husband, you're all of these other things. But the thing that you would most often lead with when somebody says, what do you do? That's gone. And that's a really hard emotional shift for people to make.
Yeah, my dad still says I'm like a retired nurse anesthetist. So like
You still
I
got
don't
to
know.
sneak it in there.
It's funny. It's like what do you do? And I guess we should be asking a question of like what do you enjoy, right? But it's tough, right? Because I think with work it provides so much structure, purpose, status, social interaction. Like that is such a huge role. So going back to my dad. He retired officially. And then actually there was an opportunity for him to do some contract work on the side. And I think he was struggling with, the change in pace. So he actually went back to do the contract work and he didn't last too long because he was working with different people and the whole structure of what he knew completely changed because he was now doing contract work. That did not last long. And I think that actually helped him because I think he then realized like, okay, what I loved about work was where I used to work and the social interaction and the structure that I had. So that kind of helped him kind of make the transition, but it is tough. And I think you need to retire to something. right? Like you can't retire from something, which is your job, which is a big part of your identity. Like you kind of have to have an emotional, I don't want to say emotional, but you have to have like a plan for that next step and what are you going to enjoy and what are you going to look towards? Because, your Tuesday, Thursday mornings are going to get a little dull if you don't have a plan in place, in order to make that transition.
I heard an interesting way to approach conversations where you meet somebody for the first time, and instead of asking, "What do you do?" you ask, "What do you love to do?"
Do you love to do?
And
Yeah.
I think that framing, if a retiree or a pre-retiree who's approaching retirement turns that question onto themselves, not what do I do? That's not my occupation. What do I love to do? And now you can start teasing out the hobbies and the interests and the
Yeah.
things that you can now start to fill your daily calendar with once you don't have to go to the office anymore. So I think that framing of not what defines you based on your occupation, but what do you love to do? I love to
Yeah.
spend time with my grandchildren. I love to play pickleball. I love to golf. I love to whatever. You can now start to frame your own life based on your interests and your passions and your hobbies.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think a lot of times for the majority of people that we have, and we have like pretty long-standing relationships, a lot of that has been built throughout, years of conversation, which then make that conversation so much easier. Um, I hate like when you think of like the typical advisor meeting, they're like, "What are you going to travel?" Like, I mean, how many times can you go to Europe? Let's be completely honest, right? Like, there has to be more than that. And I think that's why I enjoy working with those where we have a long-standing relationship because we already understand what makes these people tick. And now it's how do we create a little bit more structure when you do retire to actually enjoy the things that you love? Because I think the other issue is you might love family, pickleball, golf, whatever it might be, but are you setting yourself up for success in making that a part of your day, or your retirement? And I think a lot of times people are not being as active because they're not structuring it within their day to be able to do the things that they actually love. I know it sounds strange and simplistic, but I see it all the time. So I think retirees have to be really mindful of, hey, here's what I enjoy, here's what I love, and I'm going to structure it like I would a work day, right? Or a work week, so that I have that consistent interaction and that purpose within my life so that I'm actually enjoying what I'm doing.
Humans are creatures of routine,
Yeah.
and the idea of planning out your week or your
Yeah.
day during retirement seems funny, but I think it
It
helps
works.
make that transition. If you are literally putting on your calendar, I'm going to go visit my grandchildren, then you have your day planned, you know what you're going to do, and now you have obligations. I fall victim to this anytime I go on vacation. By day 4 or 5, I'm just like, I need to get back to routine.
Yeah.
I need to
I
get
go.
back to some semblance of waking up in the morning and having a set amount of things that I need to do for the day. And so having an idea about a structured routine, even in retirement, I think can help a lot of people make that mental shift.
I like using the calendar. I think and it sounds crazy, but I think that's actually a really good idea. Because for me personally, I live and die by my calendar. I look at it all the time. I already know what I have for the day, but I still look at it. And then I'm looking at what does the next week bring and the week after so that I can prepare for it. And it actually is, you're kind of looking forward to your weeks and you're planning ahead. And I think you can absolutely do that within retirement to give you things that you're really looking forward to. Um, the one caveat I will say, and when you said like, what do you love to do? Me and you are in trouble because I'm thinking in my mind, what do I love to do? I'm like, oh, financial and tax planning. Good luck. You're like, it's portfolio management. So we're in trouble, David.
The old adage of if you find a job that you love, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
Well, you need to kind of change that mentality as you go into retirement,
Yeah.
or
A little
maybe
bit.
find something that's tangential to your job that doesn't
Yes.
require the same amount of time commitment. I know my father from experience, he's entertained the idea of getting on a few boards,
Mhm.
doing things that are part-time, things that are speak to his mission in life and things that he's passionate about, but it doesn't require the full-time commitment that a 9 to 5 job does.
Yeah, I was working with somebody, and you know what they were doing? I found this really interesting. Is there's sometimes at your local colleges they offer like free classes to retirees, I think that's an awesome idea because it keeps you sharp. You're consistently, and I think that's a big part of working, right? Is you're always learning something new, and that makes it really rewarding. So if you retire now, you have more time. And say you were a financial advisor, but you wish you were a historian. I don't know, right? Like then you could take classes to kind of keep your mind sharp and to stay engaged. And you're probably then building an additional social network by going to those overall classes. So I think looking at those things and being really intentional about it, I think is extremely important.
And our friend, or my friend from the line to get the autograph, the final piece of what he said was, "I've settled in nicely."
Yeah.
So he did make that adjustment. That first year was rough, according to him. And I always like to make the analogy to somebody driving down the highway and they decide for whatever reason to pull the e-brake. Terrible idea on the highway, probably just as bad, maybe not physically, but just as bad of an idea if you go into retirement without thinking through some of the things that we've talked about today, because it is going to feel like that. You're cruising down the highway of life, you pull the e-brake and retire, and if you don't have a plan in place, you're going to end up spinning out of control.
Yeah, I'm glad you ended with that because I think for the majority of people that we work with, they do settle in. Right? Like the first year, maybe the first 2 years are kind of scary. And I think for a multitude of reasons, it's a big psychological shift. But then also, the planning does change a little bit. And I think some people are a little uncertain going from deposits to now withdrawals. You give it a year to 2 years, you have the framework set up from the financial side, right? You've kind of found some new purpose. And then people then tend to really settle in nicely. So for the majority of people that we work with, I do think that, that kind of line really holds true.
And I've heard this quote more times than I can count from people who were kicking the can down the road, thinking about retirement, their money, everything lined up, everything worked in our projections. The line that I keep coming back to is, "I wish I did it sooner."
Yeah.
The biggest resource that exists, the most finite resource on the planet for people is time. And you might be able to add a few more dollars to your balance sheet by working an extra year or two, but you can't get that time back. That's one less year that you have on this planet to be enjoying yourself. And the amount of times that people have said, "I wish I did it sooner," that really resonates with me. And if you need that help making that jump from working, cruising down the highway of life to now, instead of pulling the e-brake, downshift a little bit, slow down, see what life looks like beyond retirement. And that's something that we can help here with at Continuum. We do it every day for people. And hopefully anybody listening to this that needs the confidence to make that jump, we're here to help.
100%. Love to do it. It's our passion. So thank you so much, David. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, we'll leave you guys with that. And if somebody sent this to you or you're hearing us for the first time, be sure to subscribe either on YouTube or on your podcast player of choice to get new episodes. We're going to be hopefully more consistent about getting these out, maybe twice a month. We've been sticking to pretty consistent once a month. We want to start upping that, getting that the information out to people. So thanks for joining me, Pat, and we'll see everybody next time.
Awesome. Take care, guys.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Retirement Done Right. To learn more, visit us at contwealth.com.